Alright, so today we're dealing with the transmission mechanism of monetary policy. So where we're going to start is a recession. So a recession is characterized, as we know, by low GDP growth, high unemployment, low inflation, and so the Fed would institute easy or expansionary money policy to combat the recession. So to enact easy money policy, what the Fed would do is they would buy bonds from the public to increase the money supply, lower the discount rate, lower the federal funds rate, which helped to lower, in general, interest rates, lower the reserve requirements so there's more loanable funds available, all of these having the effect of lowering interest rates, and the Fed would be trying to increase the supply of money, so more money in circulation hopefully means more spending, and when the economy spends more, there's more aggregate demand. So if we start with our ASAD diagram, we've drawn this before. Here shows the recessionary gap. So we currently have a current output, YC, of AD and SRAS, and then we have that being below our potential output, our full employment output. So we have a recessionary gap as the difference in GDP between current output and potential. So we look at the money market first, which pits the nominal interest rate, NIR, versus the quantity of money. The Fed sets the supply of money, so I'll start by drawing the market, supply and demand for money. And we have our equilibrium interest rate, I1, and our first quantity of money. And the Fed is going to want to increase the money supply to lower interest rates, and there to be more money available. So some of that money will end up in the loanable funds market, which pits the real interest rates versus the quantity of loanable funds. And so we have the supply and demand for loanable funds with our original equilibrium interest rate and quantity. So because of the Fed's actions, it's going to increase the supply of loanable funds, as there's going to be more money available in banks as loanable funds, which is going to lower the real interest rate and increase the amount that is borrowed. And with the real interest rate falling, we look at the investment demand curve to show that interest rates and the quantity of investment have an inverse relationship, so that when the real interest rate falls, there is a greater amount of investment spending. So with this graph, we notice that the interest rate falls causes consumption and investment spending to rise, which thus is going to lead us to aggregate demand rising. So if we go over the ASAD model graph showing our original recession, our original problem, and our recessionary gap, and the effect of easy money policy, we would notice that aggregate demand is going to increase until ideally it reaches our potential output. So with the effects of easy money policy being the price level rises, so we have real GDP increasing, and thus lowering the unemployment rate, which was the biggest problem of a recession in general. So through the transmission mechanism, we go from the Fed increasing the money supply. That money ends up hopefully as loanable funds, which lowers the interest rates, which then allows for more consumption and investment spending, which allows aggregate demand to increase. But the money supply changing by itself does not affect aggregate demand, only spending does. So we have to take the direct effect of monetary policy being changing the money supply through the loanable funds, through investment demand, to eventually show us that there's more or less spending, depending on which type of monetary policy we're using.